A lot of what I try to do in my work and as a parent is, as we all do, to respect the emotional intelligence of our own children and other people's children. And angry feelings can be hard for a child and hard for a parent too. There's so much in a young child's life that really is out of their control.
And I love what you said about respecting children's emotions because as a parent myself, I have to stop sometimes and say, okay, this child is also feeling something just as much as I'm feeling it. Being an artist can be a heck of a ride, but you're not alone. On Journey of the Art, we tell inspiring stories of artists and chat with those who support us on this path. I'm your host, Lola Opataya, writer, editor, singer, and all round lover of words. Come with me on the journey. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Journey of the Art. Today we're talking about writing about emotions for young readers and highlighting my guest's latest work, Shy Me. In my virtual room is Sandra V. Feeder. Sandra is the author of the best-selling Emotions and Me picture book series. Shy Me, the newest book in the series, which is illustrated by Ashley Barron, joins Angry Me and Peaceful Me, a Bank Street College of Education Best Children's Book of the Year. Sandra's other works include Bitter and Sweet, The Moon Inside, and the Daisy series. She's a graduate of Stanford and the Vermont College of Fine Arts, where she earned a master's degree in writing for children. Also, fun fact, Sandra is a black belt in Taekwondo. And with that, I'll say welcome, Sandra.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you. Thank you for agreeing to come chat with me today. So when I read your bio and I saw that you have a black belt in Taekwondo, I thought, how cool. And I thought I'd ask, how long did it take for you to get your black belt?
Oh, that's such a good question. Probably almost 10 years or so. It's a long process.
Wow.
And I don't remember exactly how long we did it. My husband and I started as a great way to keep in shape and reduce stress and all those good things. And then as part of the program, you keep earning the different belts, and there we were, breaking boards and enjoying the whole thing. So we stayed with it for quite a while.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I think that it's so fitting that you've written a book on emotions, having been through that process of building resilience and managing stress. And so I'm so excited to get into today's conversation on writing about emotions for young readers. But before we get started, if you're watching this, please note that this podcast is also available wherever you get your podcasts. So look up Journey of the Art and listen on the go. Also, if you love the content, please subscribe to the channel or follow the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening from. This ensures we're connected so you're up to date with the latest content. And now to the business of the day. We're talking about Shy Me, the latest addition to the Emotions and Me series, which is out in April, I believe.
Early March, actually,
Early
even
March.
sooner. Yeah.
Early March. So that is wonderful. Can you remember the moment when you knew you were absolutely going to write this series?
Well, I have 3 daughters, and when, they were little, my youngest seemed to have, easier access to her anger than
Right.
her older sisters, and it was new for me, and I had to figure out, how do I process her angry feelings? A lot of what I try to do in my work and as a parent is, as we all do, to respect the emotional intelligence of our own children and other
Mm,
people's children.
mm,
And angry feelings can be hard for a child and hard for a parent too. But I really got the idea for the Emotions in Me series through my youngest's angry feelings and realizing, trying to think about it. What were the situations that were really making her feel this way?
right.
And realizing that there's so much in a young child's life that really is out of their control. They're
Mm,
taken places, they're put in situations that they don't always have a say over. And
right.
so I got this notion of trying to address some of that from the child's perspective. So these books are written in a first person, point of view from actually the young child's perspective. And to me, that felt like the best way to honor those strong feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree that the first person really brings, the reality of those feelings to the core. And I love what you said about respecting children's emotions, because as a parent myself, I have to stop sometimes and say, okay, this child is also feeling something just as much as I'm feeling it. So I really love that you shared that. I am curious. So there's been three books in the series now. There's Angry Me, there's Peaceful Me, and now there's Shy Me. So there are many emotions a child may struggle with. How did you decide what emotions should be included in the series?
So, as I said, I started with anger because that just what was present at that moment for me as a young parent. And I felt very strongly also with Angry Me that um, I wanted that character to be a little girl. I
Right,
have felt for a long time that even in my own life, often girls, I hope this is less true now, but are often taught that tears or sadness are okay emotions, but anger is not so much. So I
right,
really wanted to show this little girl in the fullness of her anger.
right,
As I started to conclude Angry Me, it occurred to me that there was a flip side emotion to anger.
right,
And I actually had to think long and hard about what that was. It's not exactly happiness.
mm,
And I settled on peacefulness. I felt like where Angry Me ends is with see the art here, the little girl
right,
um, being able to release that anger and have room
right,
for a different emotion. And
right,
so I got the idea of what would that feeling feel like, and peacefulness is where that came from. And then I was so blessed with the wonderful illustrator for both Angry Me and Peaceful Me, the
yeah,
super talented Rahele Jamapour Bell. And in talking to her, she said to me, I was a really shy child. I think that might be another one for you to tackle. And of course, that then brought up for me how one of my children had been a very, very shy child as well. So that's how we landed on Shy Me.
right. Wonderful. And then there's Lonely Me coming out in 2026, which we're going to talk about later. But I am so excited to also talk about that. And thank you for sharing that process. So it seems to me that of a it was less of a strategy and more of a discovery, which is wonderful because I think that's more effective in actually writing, these stories because you are thinking about it and peeling back all those layers and figuring out what the next best thing is for the children to read about. And that's wonderful. What emotion was the hardest to write about?
Hmm. Um, that's a really good question. I think they're all interesting and a little bit different. And I think what was fun for me is exactly what you said, is sort of peeling back the layers of each of these and trying to really understand um, what it feels like to be in those places. Um, I had a wonderful writing teacher at one point in my life who really stressed how important it is for us as children's book authors to put ourselves back in our childhood selves. And I really feel like to do these books effectively, I had to do some of that. Remember the feelings myself as a child, what my own children had felt going through some of these emotions,
Right.
and then really think about the particular situations where a child might feel some of these things.
Hmm. That is interesting what you said about going back to your younger self and figuring out what things frustrated you, made you happy. And so, thank you for sharing that. If you're a writer and you're watching or listening to this, what emotion is the hardest one for you to write about and why? Please share your thoughts in the comments. So, back to you, Sandra. The children in the series are quite proactive in the way they sort through their emotions. For instance, the main character in Peaceful Me decides to picture something beautiful or go to a quiet place when they're not feeling peaceful. And the character in Shy Me practices their task or finds a buddy to overcome their shyness. I really love how the series portrays these children taking agency for their own emotions. What informed this approach?
Hmm. I think a lot of the approach to these books came from my own approach to parenting, which is I'm a talker. So if my kids were going through something, I would really, sometimes it felt like just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what would stick, but I would offer as many types of solutions as I possibly could to see what might resonate with their little selves at that time.
Right, right,
Um, so I didn't want each of these books simply to be here is a child struggling with an emotion or feeling out of sorts, or in Peaceful Me starts feeling peaceful, but then that changes. And how do you get back to that feeling? Um, and so each of them does have kind of a turn in the
yeah,
middle of the manuscript where the child then tries to sort of solve the emotional problem.
right,
Um, However, I'm also a big believer that childhood is complicated, big feelings are complicated. And in all of these books, it's not so much that there's, okay, now I figured it all out moment, but more strategies that you can try in different settings and different places.
right,
And one thing I wanted to mention, which I mentioned the illustrator of the first two of these books in the series, but I have the most wonderful new illustrator for Shy Me and Lonely Me, Ashley Barron. And Ashley has done such a beautiful job with Shy Me of creating things for this character that I didn't even imagine, which is part of the gift for me as an author of working
right,
with talented illustrators. But some of the solutions come out of my words, but also, of course, coupled with the beautiful vision Ashley had for our character.
right. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship between yourself and the illustrators? I'm curious to know if you had a vision of what the picture should look like, or they read the books and said, I think this might work better for this one and that one. How did that look like?
Yeah, so being a children's book author is a huge act of letting go. And I don't think most people realize that. I do not pick the illustrator, the publisher does. I
Right,
like to think I have sort of veto power if it was really someone I was like, no, that's not my vision at all. Um, I've been so blessed. My publisher, Groundwood, has paired me with just incredibly talented people. Um, and then I think the beauty of picture books really is that you're getting, through my words, a story, an idea, a concept,
right,
a character, different situations, but then they're really brought to life through the vision also of the illustrator.
right,
And it's that double, I don't know, miracle that happens when you mix these two things together to
right,
create something really special. So I actually don't speak with the illustrator during the process. And that's intentional. Again, so that I'm not saying, "Well, oh, no, I think this person
yeah,
should look like that," and I suppose there's also the concern of too many chefs in the kitchen.
right,
The art director at the publishing house does a beautiful job of working with the illustrator, thinking about which of my words go on which page, which illustrations go on which page, and, um, and bringing it all together. So it really wasn't until I finished these two books with Rahele that we connected and we're so pleased to finally sort of meet each other after I've creating this thing together. And
right,
um, I'm looking forward to that with Ashley as well because it really is a special bond when you've
right,
created something together.
right. That is beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And the other thing I observed about the series is a format of sorts that frames the narration. So it's this process of the child first acknowledging what they're feeling and the places where these emotions come to play. Then they're recognizing how this impacts their day and then deciding their own strategies to feel better. And I believe rather, that this format lends itself to the outcome of each book, which is the agency that we just talked about. How would you say that readers have responded to this format?
I think readers have responded really well to it. I think both, again, because it really does honor the child's very real feelings by having the situations described in that childlike
Right.
voice. Um, and I have had the pleasure of children reading the books to me and then stopping and adding their own little comments in. So, which was really exciting, and for me as an author to feel like, ah, yes, that really is resonating. So, a friend's child read Me with me, and there's a one of the places the little girl gets angry is when she feels tired, and just it's like too much.
Right.
I can't, and doesn't even have the words to explain
Mm.
her feelings. And the child reading to me just stopped and looked at me and said, that happens to me a lot. And I was just so touched that this really was her reality.
Right.
So, and the other thing I would say about that in terms of how people respond, my hope as an author and with these books in particular is they're picture books. They're meant to be read with either a parent and a child or a caregiver and a child. And I always hope that they're really conversation starters, that really
Right.
what I'm doing is helping the child acknowledge, relate, have some words to put around their strong emotions, some maybe, as you said, ideas for how to get past those emotions, or just kind of coping strategies. And then you're really opening the door for conversation about
Right.
all of this.
And I felt that very strongly when I read all three books. I said to myself, this is, wow, this is such a great conversation starter. Because I can imagine my daughter saying, yes, I do feel tired and that makes me angry. Or I do feel nervous about, something that I've practiced and that makes me shy. It's not that I don't know the thing, I just feel nervous about it. So thank you for sharing that. And Sandra, you mentioned this a few some minutes ago. You talked about being a mom of three adult daughters. Do you feel differently now about children's emotions than you did when you were a younger mom?
Hmm, that is a good question. I'm sure I do. Being a mother of three grown daughters, it's different. They're still big emotions.
Right.
They're just a little bit different. You're a little bit more of a coach
Right.
than that hands on, really trying to help them solve the problems
Right.
when your kids are older. I think looking back, even as a young parent, and it probably came from my own mother, who was an elementary school teacher. I think I grew up in a household where um, it was acknowledged that you're going to have different emotions
Right.
and they're not necessarily good or bad. They're just part of who you are. Um, and so I think I tried to bring that to my own parenting. Um, I think now looking back, I think today's families are so busy, maybe in a way that we were a little less busy when my kids were younger. So figuring out how to juggle these really big feelings
Right.
in the midst of all that, I think is possibly even more difficult.
Right.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah, as a younger mom, I would agree very much with that statement. And I'm curious, does this, I would say, layered understanding of children's emotions influence your writing now?
um, yeah, I think definitely. I think whatever I'm working on, whether it's my Emotions in Me series, which is very near and dear to my heart, or other projects, I've always wanted to get at that emotional heart. Um, I think for children's book authors, we talk a lot about writing our own heart stories,
Right.
the stories that come from our own hearts that feel important to us, and therefore you hope also will to other readers. So yeah, I think getting at that emotional truth of a
Mhm.
character and what they're feeling makes any story. And as an author, that's always what you want to try to do because that makes your characters come alive.
Right.
And I'm also very aware as a picture book author that picture books are meant to be read again and again. And what's going to keep a child and a parent picking up your book over and over? It has to have that depth and that richness and even those layers of here is the problem and here's another way of looking at it and here's some other words we can put to it and here's some things we could try and also having maybe not too neatly tied up solutions,
Right.
something I also try to do as an author because again I think that keeps you coming back when the child and the parent can keep seeing newer ways to think about the character and what they've been going through and how they
Right.
end the story.
Right. Right. So, Sandra, what are some tips that you can share to help children's book writers posture themselves to better understand and communicate children's emotions?
I think understanding emotions, whether we're writing for children and writing about them or just moving through the world, is a lot about listening and
Mm.
observing. I think whether we're doing that with our adult friends and people in our lives, family, or with kids in our lives, um, not just reacting. I think it's very easy as a parent to react when your child is either feeling angry or in the case of shy me, I think sometimes as parents, um, the tendency can be, oh, it's okay. You know, one of my daughters who was very shy would do that thing of burying her face in my leg. And you have a tendency a little bit to want to kind of pull her off and present her to the world. Um, and that would happen even around people she knew, which is part of Shy Me, about grandparents or other family members or friends. And I think sometimes as a parent, our tendency is to say, oh, it's okay, rather than really sort of trying to internalize what this child is feeling. So I think for all authors and people, wanting to think and understand and write about emotions, it's really observing, listening, um, being sensitive to
Right.
what someone else is feeling.
Right. Right. And Sandra, I noticed that you have some heartwarming reviews and beautiful pictures from previous presentations at schools. Would you mind sharing a bit about these events? How I know you talked about how kids have responded to your work, but could you share a bit about what that looks like for you?
I love doing school visits, and it's so fun to be present with the students. With the first two books in my Emotions in Me series, I had put together a presentation, and I was curious to see how the kids reacted to it. Um, but I was very taken with the body language of the characters in both Angry Me and Peaceful Me, and now you'll see with Shy Me too. Oh my gosh, the the way the illustrators have shown these emotions in the physical being of the children was something I really thought the kids would relate to, and it turned out I was right. Um, when I've done my presentation in schools, we talk a lot about how we hold our bodies when we're angry,
Mm.
what it feels like inside.
Right.
And the kids today are so emotionally aware that they immediately can understand the raised shoulders and the clenched fist of the
Right.
angry little girl and the joyful, more open posture of the peaceful little boy. And we talk a lot about what it feels like to have those harder feelings inside, what it feels like when we release them. They're able to share with me some of their own strategies for releasing their feelings,
Mm.
for finding the peaceful. I happen to live in beautiful Northern California, and the natural world features prominently in Peaceful Me as a way to find some of that kind of I don't know, just the shoulders relaxing, the tension leaving, and kids really have their own beautiful ways of talking about
Right.
where they can find that peacefulness. So it's been really fun to share these books in the schools.
Yeah, there are evidences all over your website.
Thank you.
So if you're listening, go check out Sandra's website. I'll share the links in the description. So we talked about this earlier, but now is the time to talk about Lonely Me, which will be released in 2026, and it's also published by Groundwood Books. Would you like to share a bit about this?
Yeah, so I think Lonely Me really is sort of a child of the pandemic. I
Right.
think all of us really understood loneliness on a different level. And there's so many children who are the post pandemic generation who have had to figure out how to recede into themselves and then to re-enter the world and to sort of do all of that as young people, and those are hard things. It was hard for us as adults to figure all of that out. So I started thinking more about that period of time when we all felt a little bit lonely, a little bit isolated. Our own American Surgeon General has published a report saying that we have an epidemic of loneliness in the United States. And I know we are not alone in terms of that around the world. So I think this notion of what it means to feel lonely um, is something we all need to confront as human beings, as parents, and certainly for me as an author. How can I help kids think about what it means to be lonely? What are the places they might feel lonely situationally and emotionally? And then how do they maybe take some steps to connect with other people? And what does that look like?
Right, right. I'm already looking forward to that. Because I'm sure that a lot of kids will be able to relate to that. Like you said, even, as an adult, I can relate to those feelings of loneliness during the pandemic, and some of those effects still linger on today. So thank you for sharing that. We will
Mhm.
cross our fingers and look forward to that while we continue to share so much about Shiny. I want to thank you, Sandra, for coming to chat with me today. I appreciate you sharing your insights, and I wish you much success with the series.
Thank you so much for having me. It was delightful. I really enjoyed our conversation.
You're very welcome. On the next episode, I'll be chatting with another inspiring artist. But before then, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me what you think about this show and this episode. Feel free to drop me a note here or send me a DM on Instagram at Journey of the Art Plot. Finally, please subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, or follow and rate the show if you're listening elsewhere. Help me connect with other artists who need a dose of inspiration today. Until next time, stay on the journey of your art.